So I've got a gig. It's been a while since I've had a gig. I used to gig quite a lot, and then since moving to this tiny little seaside village that I live in, which is in a remote part of regional New South Wales in Australia, I don't kind of get out and gig a lot. There was going to be a gig last year or earlier this year. That didn't happen. But I've been invited to go and play a gig in Sydney, which is really cool. So what I've been doing is going, what am I taking? What am I doing? And working through what my thought processes are for setting up a live rig, both audio and visual, which is down there. And that'll be a second video just to go through my video setup. But thought maybe you might be interested in the configuration that I've got and what I'm doing and some of that kind of background thinking of putting this together, module selection, working with the Push 3 Standalone, and obviously interfacing that with the modular and working through things like that. My thought processes in terms of approaching this particular gig is my previous definition or genre that I was working in when I used to gig a lot was really that kind of drone space, that deep listening space. Still very much sitting in that improvised, let's just jam it and see, not have too much kind of pre-prepared, but have a framework of space, instruments, things to be able to work with, but at the same time letting things progress and morph so that when something is brought in, it's going to be naturally evolving or changing somehow. And now, you know, fast forward 10 years since that other life, and now in this life, I'm really into that space of percussion more. There was less percussion when I was doing more droney stuff. And now I'm really into the percussion. I'm really into just like the kick and a big kick, playing with the rumble idea, and then how that percussion and how that kick merges with the drone side of things, which I still really love, and that sort of deep listening. The other thing that I'm unsure of is I don't know what the crowd's going to be like. I know some of the other acts that I'm playing with, they are more dance focused. I don't know if I'm going to have the opportunity to do the deep listening kind of really slow psychedelic doom. So I've got this set up so that I can change tempos pretty quickly and work with the audience a little bit, but still, you know, being able to express my own creative vision. So let's go through everything. I'm going to start over with the push, and we'll talk about that, and then I'll come over and talk about each individual module. And excuse me while I move the camera. So the first thing that I was thinking about was just like keep it simple. I want to have a big sound. I know that I want to be able to kind of maximize my sound sources, with the majority of sound sources coming from the modular, but still being able to use the push as a framework, still being able to access sounds and use sounds that I don't have in the modular through the push. And let's go through the setup. One thing that I just really want to kind of say is I've got an Ableton Move as well, and the Move has been really fun to be able to work with, and I just want to commend the Ableton designers on their workflow, the programmers on continuing to update the firmware and add new features, and it's just, you know, it's aging like a fine wine. It's just, they keep on doing it. And the workflow between the move and the push is really, really kind of interesting, because there's no LFOs, there's limited modulation options in the move. And so the operator becomes the modulation. And it's interesting to then sort of jump over and spend a bit more time with the push, where I do have things like the Elizabeth Homeland LFO for push on here, so I can kind of come across and modulate things, but then thinking about how I can stay in that improvised space of triggering clips, recording little sequences into clips in here, but then also have some kind of modulation options and some automation options. So I'm just kind of, I'm working through that process. And the other thing that I should just say about this is that this is still in an evolutionary mode that I'm kind of building through, but I've got to a point where I feel like I can kind of share how this is all set up. So I started on the computer and I built a template, and the template was based off this idea that the first channel was going to be a drum rack. And this is another thing that I've kind of taken from Move, because you've only got 4 tracks on a Move, but when you load up a drum rack, you've got 16 sounds. And so I really love the idea of having just one channel that's got multiple sounds going on here. So that was my very, very first thing. And we'll go through that in a second. I've got the Kickain coming through on its own channel with a very minimal processing, except to kind of make it mono. So I've got a utility on there. And then everything else I'm doing with the Move, with the Kickain, I can do on the front panel. So I can, you know, drive it, add the reverb, drop the decay down if I'm going faster, tempos, etc. The other thing that you're hearing is I've got my rumble set up on this first channel as well. I've just got an input channel here for the percussion. The other thing that's not shown over here is I've got an Ovation launch control just over on the other end of the modular, and because I've got that, I wanted to be able to have ease of volume control, ease of pans, ease of delay and reverb sends, and so that was the thinking, that I've got 6 tracks and 2 returns, and then I can control all of that from the Launch Control XL without having to kind of page through other things. So I set up the channels, the tracks, and I set up the MIDI mapping with the Launch Control on the computer. Now this is when these next 3 tracks are all modular and are using the ES10 from Expert Sleepers in and out, connected through ADAT from the push. So I'm able to bring in 8 audio signals or CV signals if you want them, and then also send out signals. So the Atom here, this is actually triggering the After Later Audio Atom, which is an Elements clone. And we'll talk about how that's configured when we get over to there. But what I've got here is the ability to be able to record that, be able to kind of play that live. This is going to be loud, excuse me. Do things like be able to change the envelope. So I've not only got a trigger coming out of this, but I've also got the envelope going out. So I can control what's happening with the Atom running through like that. So that's that one. And then being able to kind of pitch that up and down as well. And then the next channel that's coming in is the VHIKK. Really interested to know if anyone knows, because this is set up as a MIDI track and I've got the CV instrument on there, the thing that I wanted to do was be able to have not only the CV instrument that would send gate and pitch information, so I can use the grid, the keyboard grid, but also wanted to process the audio through the same channel. So the only way that I kind of worked out from being able to do that was then adding an external audio effect and then pulling the audio in from the ES10, the Expert Sleepers ES10, which kind of works okay. So it's, you know, the CV's going out. I guess I could have, you know, hidden tracks or group tracks or something, but because I haven't kind of worked in live for a very, very long time and have just been kind of out of the box and focusing on hardware-based performances, I'm sure there's a trick. So if someone can put something in the comments about, you know, is this the best way of actually setting it up? I mean, it works, so, but maybe there's a more efficient way. I don't know. And so the VHIKK, we'll jump over to the modular. When we jump over to the modular, I'll talk about this, but this was set up originally for the Forge TME VHIKK-X only as an input, but as I've been working through, this is now mixing 3 signals. It's mixing the Plasmavoice, it's mixing the Dust of Time, and it's mixing the VHIKK-X. And I've got all that submixed through an Endorphins 1U cockpit and the Endorphins Golden Master over on the modular. So I've got these 3 things coming in. I don't know where this shifter came from. Maybe it's there for a reason, I don't know. Maybe we'll just mute that for a second. EQ8, so some things that I'm doing here for this particular input. I don't know, yeah, I've got some stuff going on for the Atom as well. For the Atom, I've got an echo, a drum bus for some saturation on it, an EQ8 just to kind of drop off that low end, and then a compressor with a side chain from the kick. So that was the other rationale between having the kick as its own separate input channel, is being able to use that as a source throughout the whole setup as a side chain, to be able to duck the other more drony technical textural elements. But on the VHIKK, I've got the compressor set up, but it's bypassed because I've been using the sidechain functionality in the Endorphins cockpit for all of those 3, and just kind of playing around with what's sounding better. Cool, and then just some sort of saturation on the end there. The final modular input is simply just the multigrain. So this is the IntelliGel multigrain. I've got no other processing happening with that, because the majority of those are kind of spoken word or voice sort of samples. Here's one. So I've just got that going. Whether or not I need to kind of sidechain that, I'm unsure just at the moment. And then I've simply just got a delay send and a reverb send. I have to admit, I'm not a big sends person, and I have to learn more about that. I have to kind of integrate that more into my process, and use them a little bit more. I mean, one of the things that's absolutely amazing about the Push is you just kind of keep adding effects and just keep adding and keep adding and keep adding, and it doesn't seem to miss a beat. So that's the overview of that. Let's just jump back into the samples and see in this track what I've got going on in here. I'm progressively making rumbles. So let's get the kick going. Let's get the kick going. So if I mute that, you can just hear dry kick. It's cool because the Kickain's got its own reverb. But I just love making the rumbles. So corpus with a plate, overdrive, filter delay, compressor to side chain the kick itself, an auto filter, EQ8 just to kind of drop the low end so the kick stays in its own little kind of spot. And that's it for that one. This one, so I can do this where I can filter delay, reverb, raw, glue compressor, auto filter. So I'll just keep adding a few more. And the other thing that I've been thinking about with using the drum rack on this particular channel is being able to actually, you can have more than just 16 sounds. I can just kind of build this. So I'm feeling like I'm going to keep this particular setup for a while and just keep on adding and iterating and building this kind of library of sounds in here. So yeah, this bottom row will be rumbles that I can kind of work through. And I guess let's just have a listen to this. Yeah, I mean, like 1,000 different ways to build rumbles. You can search those out on the web. I won't go into the deep, dark depths of doing that in this video. It's got some kind of crazy bell samples, things. This is like my hi-hats, and I need to do some more, but the idea that I've got an arpeggiator on it, an auto filter that's going through different states. I've got the LFO, so yeah, so the auto filter LFO is just kind of changing that bandpass filter around. So anytime I hit this, it's going to be different, but the same. Let's go. And yeah, I've got the Elizabeth Homeland. The trick with a drum rack and the LFO for push is the LFO for push needs to be at the drum rack level, not on the drum pad level for it to actually work. And it's And it's good because then this LFO is available globally to all of the sounds. And so I've got that modulating the decay on the hi-hats. Fun. Another big kind of gongy, with some grain delay, auto pan going on. I've got a granulator, and there's a version of the granulator that's out there for Push 3 that enables you to be able to select sounds. So if I go into here, it gives you an extra tab. So when you tab this, you need to have your samples sitting in a particular folder in your user library, and then as long as those samples are inside another folder, you can have a majority of samples sitting inside that, and then you're able to just be able to kind of go through and choose samples directly on here. So it's great. All I do is plug this in. I've got that folder system set up. I can load that, and I can load different samples on the fly into the granulator. Let's just go back to main. And so this is augmenting my multigrain that's in the modular rack as well. And the other great thing about, you've got the 16 pitches option for the drum pads, so that when you select this, you can play things at different pitches or just trigger the simple pad. And so then that's a part of the idea as well. I've got two sounds. This is a preset that I chose, dark art bass, that I've fiddled around with as another drone element. And then I've got a wave table. And again, can sidechain that. So I'm building this little repository up still. I know that in the latest beta there's this cool XYZ option that turns these top pads into an XYZ, so you can kind of modulate on 3 different axes or 3 different parameters across 3 different axes. And I'm kind of hoping, I mean, I'm in the beta, but because I'm building for this live set, I don't want to risk it. They're very stable releases that they release as part of the public beta, but maybe if that comes out before December, then maybe I'll upgrade and I'll have that. But that was a part of the idea of building in a couple of kind of little synths and being able to have this. But the other thing that this allows me to do is to improvise with some clips as I'm going. So if I'm playing, I can be doing something like, you know, the hi-hats. Doing this. So yeah, as I'm playing, if I want to sort of transition, instead of me playing these live, I can just record these on the fly, add a new kind of clip. So these are just sort of previous improvisations that I've done, and I'm thinking that, you know, before the gig these will be gone. I'll delete all of these, because the idea is that I can stay in that improvised space and build the whole set up over the course of the gig. 45 minutes I've been allocated for time. So that's the live setup. I just chose a preset on the output, thinking that whoever built all of these presets and put all of these things into these groups are more knowledgeable than me in terms of sound production, and maybe these things actually will help and keep the levels under control for the live set. It's sounding okay for me at the moment, in, you know, my limited experience. USB-C to the computer, power. This is this port up here. So yeah, USB-C to the computer, power. This is connecting to the launch control, Novation launch control for MIDI. I've got a MIDI output that's only clocking one thing. That's my main clock, and I'll talk about that and why that's like that. And then I've got the two ADATs, and then I've just got stereo out coming from the push. So everything is being mixed through the push and coming out. So you can see everything's going on in there. That's it for the moment for the push. Let's jump over to the modular and see what's happening there. So let me know if there's more about the push that you want to know, or if I'm doing something wrong. You drop me a comment, send me a message, something. Okay. I did a short of this setup, and the cables weren't in such good condition as they are now. I kind of went back to my textile loom to be able to get all of this. Big shout out to the Nest Tamers crew, Gamma Light Systems. These are amazing, just to be able to kind of keep your system in order. So underneath all of here is a whole bunch of these that's allowing me to route cables around the system and keeping them under control. Tendrils, obviously, amazing synth cable company for a lot of these and a lot of the LED cables, and that kind of keeps everything out of the way and keeps it as tidy as possible. There's still some little rat nests like down in the corner here and up over the edge and up over here, but in terms of being able to reach each of the different controls for the modules, it's feeling pretty good. I've got the Squawk Dirty to Me, the Endorphin Squawk Dirty to Me sitting in underneath here, but that's okay because I've got that being controlled from the Erica Synths Black Joystick too. Right, let's just go top to bottom and talk through. So I've got the IntelliGel MIDI 1U. I had some issues, and I got to come back to it and just kind of see, because I was hoping to be able to either use this in single or dual configuration mode, where in single mode you've got pitch, mod, gate, velocity, CC and trigger from a single voice, but then if you go into dual mode it gives you 2 pitches, 2 gates and 2 velocities out. I had just a lot of trouble getting it working from the push, and I can't work out why, and I was getting to a point where I was getting really frustrated, and I'd already added the ES10 to the rack, and I went, why am I doing this? And so this is still sending clock, and I guess I'm keeping this in here for a couple of reasons. One is I don't really have any more 1 unit modules to replace it out with that would be of any, well, I do. I've got one of the force sensing resistors, little pads from IntelliGel, and that could work, but it's still not very kind of ergonomically placed where it needs to go. But yeah, so what's my point? My point is I've still got clock coming in from here. It works well because it's got the clock divisor button right there. So if I do need to change tempos, I can just hit that and, you know, instant kind of tempo mood change to be able to go through. So that's good. And even though I could do the clock divisors in other places in the modular, I feel like having this up here is quite ergonomic and quite easy just to be able to hit that and do a clock division. And the other thing is that because this is the master clock that's coming through and is going into PAMs, I've got PAMs doing some clock division in here out to other modules. So this second divisor is going into the 3rd channel of the DivKit and Making Sound Machines DivSkip. And that 3rd channel is controlling the Plasmavoice. So in terms of being able to kind of get that sort of pulsing bass, then I can kind of split the clock here. But the benefit of having this master clock sitting up here is one button and it'll change both of the divisors of the outputs of the clock from PAMs, if that makes sense. It's just a little bit more performative. I can go bang bang, and then even though there's different clock divisors coming out of 1 and 2, the master clock will change those without any hassles, and it also saves me having to, you know, kind of go into here, find the clock divisor that I want, and then be able to change that. But I've still got that option to be able to go in, but in terms of that quick change, which is what you want in a live situation, that's where that is. Yeah, so whether or not this kind of stays there, I don't know, but at the moment it's sort of working by having it there, and it's going okay. So why don't we just keep talking about clock for a second and where that's going. So obviously clock coming into Pam's new workout. I've got the first, which is sending the same clock out to any modules that need clock. So I've got clock going into the Multigrain, I've got clock going into the endorphins. I think that's it. I think that's everything that needs clock at the moment. And then the second, I've got a second divisor to give me a different timing for just the Plasmavoice. So that's the clock, that's the time that's coming through. Let's go to the ES10 and see what that's doing. I'm constantly in this space where I feel like I'm underutilizing things, that I can always be doing more. And I guess it's a nice space to be in because the modules allow more to happen and more to be done. But because this is a reasonably new addition to interface the modular with the push, I wanted to kind of keep it simple. So in terms of routing audio, number 1 is the kick, number 2 is the percussion, which is simply just coming from the Perkons Voice, Erica Synth's Perkons Voice, and I've just pretty much got that in a snare, kicking off a snare. So that's 1 and 2. The next 2, 3 and 4 is the ALM and NIT combo. So I've got NIT, which is a Afterlater Audio Plaits clone. Left and right are going actually into the exciter in and into the resonator in of the ALM. So these two are sort of paired together, and we'll have a listen to them in a second. 5 and 6 are coming from my submix over here. So I've got the Plasmavoice coming in here, I've got the VHIKK coming in here, and then I've got the Dust of Time over here, and then I've got the extra trigger to work with the sidechain for all of those. And that's the cockpit's connected in behind, because there's a little cable that you can connect the cockpit to the Golden Master, and then the outputs of the Golden Master are coming over into 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8 inputs are coming out of the Ghost, and the only thing I've got going into the Ghost is the Multigrain, but I do have a live granular channel. What are these things called? Are these called tracks, channels? Which is an input from the VHIKK. So yeah, that's that. So that's all my ins and outs, and this was really plug and play. It was quite amazing. I think I must have had the clock set up right, and it was simply just plug these 2 things in, and then it was coming in without any hassles. One of the things that you should know if you haven't done multi-channel audio, because I think the other thing that the Push is about to support is external USB class compliant interfaces. It's got a very strange audio input-output structure in terms of, like, the first 10 tracks are made up of the internal tracks, the expression pedals, and a few other things, and then anything that you've got plugged in that expands it kind of kicks off at 9, 10, etc. It goes on like that. So you see all these kind of pairs of, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, etc. as it goes through. And yeah, if I move the camera back in a minute, I can show you that. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing to see, because you read these and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you kind of go, oh no, that's not it. Like 1 and 2 are actually 9 and 10. Cool. What else was I talking about? Okay, yeah, so that's all the input routing from the modular into Push. And then in terms of CV out, it's pretty limited. And this is what I was talking about feeling like I could probably do more, because I've got a whole 4 extra CV outputs. But I'm really only just sending pitch and envelope out of these 2. That's going to the ALM, and the pitch is going to the NIT. I don't have CV input on the ALM. I've got another method that, again, we'll get to in a second, of changing the pitch of that and why I've got that kind of set up. And then this one here is pitch, so volt per octave pitch coming out, and that's pitching the VHIKK, and it's also pitching the Dust of Time. So these 2 stay in key together as they go through. And I think I've got it doing the Plasmavoice as well. So I've got 1, 2, 3 that are all in key, but have options to be able to pitch up and pitch down the Plasmavoice, and same over here with the Dust of Time, being able to either globally or each of the voices being able to change the octave of the Dust of Time to be able to kind of layer up and down. We'll have a look at that in a second. So that's it, but I must say that this was extremely easy to be able to configure this, to be able to send different things out. The sequencing, recording notes, playing from the keyboard, everything is really cool. I think the next thing for me to explore is how I can use these to add more expressive manipulation or expressive playing from the Push and its MPE pads into some of this. So again, you know, what a wonderful situation to be in terms of options, things to explore. Okay, let's go through each of the different sounds, and we can start with the kick. So kick and snare are both being sequenced by the DivSkip. I've got it in Euclidean split, so if I go all the way this way, I can have no snare and just kind of really sparse kicks. And then as that kind of comes back in, I use the cutoff to be able to bring the snare in and out. And I've also got some stepped random modulation coming from Pams that's going into the cutoff CV. So that this is that kind of thing that I was talking about earlier about, you know, keeping it simple but making sure that there was enough things that the sounds over the course of the set would stay interesting. And so by having this modulation on the cutoff of the snare, it's always going to be doing something different. So it's not going to be the same snare sound over and over again. Sometimes it'll be more muted, sometimes it'll be brighter, and that's good because I can still manipulate the cutoff frequency of that and push it so it's sitting more in the bright or sitting more in the dark, but then also bringing it all the way down means that it's a mute and only the kick will go, or it's just kind of just almost kind of sitting in there as part of the rumble, but then you can and the other thing that I really like about, or what I've been using this for, is kind of like a white noise sort of build up. So bringing the decay up to maximum. So thinking about what in here can be utilized as transition options, and this is definitely one of those. If you turn the decay to full, it just drones, and so that works with any of the voices inside here. So that just becomes a drone. And then can be used as that. Kickain, I see lots and lots of kick drum modules that are coming out, and like Omforce, and I was a big Omforce user way back when Armicide and all of their other plugins, and you know, there's that, oh my god, you know, gassing for new gear. But honestly, this just sits everywhere that I need it to be. If I wasn't using this in combination with the push and want it to be standalone, having the sidechain kind of built in is perfect and awesome. But I'm not using that because I want the kick to be going into the push all by itself, so I can use it as a sidechain signal for other elements in the set. So simply just kind of kicking the mono out of that into the input one, and you know, lots of hands-on control. So very happy. Okay, happy with those two bits. That's cool. So the next thing that I've got going on is the knit and atom, so Plaits and elements going together. I've got Plaits in whatever that is, third from the bottom green. Maybe I should look it up and I'll write it on the screen here somewhere. And I don't have it being triggering, so it's just going out. I've got volts per octave going into it. I've got a whole bunch of modulations. Oh, the other little modulation thing that's hidden under here is an oct. And so I've got modulation from the oct going into the timbre and the morph. And I've also got modulation going into the harmonics of this as well. And this is going out stereo, so it's using the out and the aux, and that's going into the Squawk Dirty. And I've got the X control for the Squawk Dirty being controlled by the Erica synths. So I'm going to trigger the atom, and what you'll hear is being able to have the cutoff of the knit as it's going into, let's just go cutoff of, so as Plaits is going into the Squawk Dirty, and I've got that control of the Squawk Dirty happening. I can change the feel or the frequency range of Plaits going into the atom to kind of create this really interesting combined voice. So let's open that filter up and so I kind of can play with these almost like feedbacky tones with the atom when it's triggered. And because I've got an envelope going out, it's changing the length of how long the atom kind of, but I can still sort of trigger it live here for little hits. But then if I'm hitting the pads on the push, and again, this is that idea of when I hit a pad, I never exactly know exactly where this is going to be at, because the oct is just sort of chugging away here, sending out its like randomly super slow, because I've got the speed of the oct all the way down. Not that you can see it's in there, it's high. This kind of slow morphing. So every time that I hit a note or play something, it's going to be doing something different, which is exciting for me as an artist, to be able to kind of go, what's that going to do? And there's this little kind of, you know, wrestling thing that you do with the the kind of the expanse or the range of what the controls are going to be and where it is, but at the same time just letting that do what it's going to do and, you know, let it kind of speak its own voice. The other thing that I've got going on is on channel 3 here, I have the timbre of the blow and strike being controlled by the X and Y over here. And so it's another thing that, like when I and because you can record joystick movement with the black joystick too, that is something that I'll do when performing, is press and hold that and then, you know, record those joystick movements. And now that's just kind of playing away. And so it's nice because, again, every time I hit that, it's going to be doing something different. Wicked. Yep, clear that, easy. Okay, so that's the Afterlater Audio Knit, Afterlater Audio Atom, the Plaits and elements in there. So let's jump over to the next 3 sound sources. So have got the VHIKK in one of these crazy modes. Again, the VHIKK just sits in an amazing, there's not a bad sound in it. And I've got some modulation going again, so when this comes in, something different is happening. So I've got the morph and the fuse modulated. I'm controlling the field with the Y value of channel 1 on the joystick. And I've also got the basis, I've got pitch CV coming into the basis so that it's kind of in tune with what it should do. And I've also got some modulation happening for the scan, because I've got it in seed scan mode for these controls, and so it's doing that. And so this just becomes kind of like a droney voice. Let's bring in its wonderful noise. And then the other kind of bonus, so just playing with the feedback, the span, jumping through the different modes with the switches is great fun. And you know, even though it's got this big beautiful kind of field knob over here, it's really nice to just be kind of working over in this space with the joystick to be able to get that going. And so then the other thing that I've got happening is the VHIKK being live processed through the multigrain. We'll go through some of the other sounds that I've got in the multigrain in a minute, but let's just have a listen to the multigrain doing its thing. having the ghost at the end, being able to distort that. Thank you, thank you. Very, very fun, very fun. Okay, so that's that one. Plasmavoice, new edition, just learning it, working it out one bit at a time. Let's have a listen to it going. So I've got channel 3 of the DivSkip triggering it. Even though this has got a drone mode, so you can just have the oscillators on, I've chosen to leave it just in the normal triggering mode. I've got the time slider here to be able to change those things, but so change the length of the sound, but where it's at the moment, when I'm all the way here in this mode, let's have a just look, because look, you know, like, thank you for printing a manual. To be able to memorize what all of the modes are, I think it's just, is it a clock divider mode? I don't know. I'm just rifling through the manual, as you can hear, but what this essentially does is just gives me a single trigger that I can change the division. So yes, it must be clock divisor mode. And again, like I was saying before, I've got a separate clock divider in there so that I can get kind of faster basing pulses. Let's have a listen. Okay, so bring up the filter. So you can just see it sort of triggering one longer note as it's going through, but then have the ability to be able to, if I bring this over, I can do pulsing. So some things I've got going on, so Oct going in, doing some mod harm and flux, so harmonics and flux, having the little attenuators on the CV inputs is amazing because you can kind of choose what's going on. So with the flux in this particular preset of the bass bank, this will bring in this kind of extra sort of octave up FM sort of feel to it, and so don't always want that going on, but nice to have that sort of option as it's going. Having the built-in filter is really cool. What I've got happening in terms of its processing, because you might see that I've got stereo going into that input, I'm multing the output and putting it into the Terci Ruina, and I've got some CV going into the frequency and the Q, and I can increase the mangle so that the bass is then going to get this kind of really cool stereo dynamic. Let's have a listen. So you're hearing the roar in one channel. So just fun to have an extra thing to give it a bit of kind of extra stereo stuff as it goes through. What I'm thinking though is maybe not for this set, but eventually I feel like this needs its own separate input, because I feel like there's a lot of options for some post-processing for this. It has a sound, like it has its own particular unique sort of characteristic, and it's really good, but I think to be able to do some kind of complex effects chains with this in the push would be a lot of fun. But look at how nice and neat these cables are. I'd have to redo the whole thing again, and I don't know if I want to do that. So it's working okay, and I'm happy for how it is at the minute. All right. Second last bit, the dust of time. Took a chance on this because this was bought secondhand, and you never know exactly kind of what the build's like. I've not had it crash. Sometimes the screen glitches out and does weird things, but it kind of picks up, and I've been leaving this running for quite a few hours, and it's kind of just come back and it's working really well. So the basics of it is that it's got two different oscillators, and you can choose different models for different oscillators. So this, if we come over here, I've got like an FM that's happening for this side, and then on this side I've got a swarm oscillator, and there's different kind of logic options that you can go through. The menus are kind of okay, you can kind of flip through and find sort of what you need. It's got some really cool routing options where it's got like auxiliary CV out 1 and 2. You can change the different modes of stereo out from it. It's got a whole bunch of kind of CV inputs and some different clock inputs. It's got a MIDI on mini jack input option. I had this sitting in a case, and I've done a couple of sets just with the Ableton Move and a small IntelliGel palette. And what this was doing is that this had MIDI in, and then I was able to take the clock signal coming out of the Move, so USB MIDI out of the Move into MIDI in here, and then taking that clock signal and piping it out of one of the auxiliary CVs, which actually allowed me to clock the rest of the case. I think I had a Dini Pro crate in it, and I had a Bafaco Honoroy, and both of those have got clock input options. And so I was able to have kind of synced LFOs out of the crate and synced looping playback out of the Honoroy and synced delays, and using this as that kind of main, you know, multi-utility thing going on in the back there. And then, so just besides the kind of amazing waveforms, oscillator options in terms of building this up, inside there, being able to use it as a utility module as well is really cool. And that's the kind of thing that you want in a small case. But in this case, what I've got going on is, like I said, those two different, like an FM and a swarm oscillator happening. I've got a filter mapped to the macro here. I've got stereo out of this going into a dual LPG, and the dual LPG, I've got left and right happening from channel 2 of the joystick. So this again gives me that kind of stereo option where I can mix in the left and right CVs or channels from the LPG. And then the low pass gate outputs are going into the Terci Ruina. So I've got one input just going through the top distortion algorithm, and then the bottom one going through the two bottom ones. And so this will allow me to bring in some distortion. So let's have a listen. Lots of kind of hands-on. And you know, like the decision is always, do I go distortion and then filter it, or do I go, you know, filter distortion? And I've gone, you know, LPG into the distortion so that even when it's in those really low registers, there's that extra little bit of grunge. Yeah, so being able to, you know, pick that stuff up. Detuning that swarm oscillator. Filtering. Mixing from one to the other. Plus having the volts per octave, the pitch being able to control from the push. Lovely, lovely. Cool. Last. We're so close. I think we've been going for a while now. Oh my God, an hour and 14 minutes. Thanks for staying around. There's time markers, so you can jump through to seeing what you want to do and whatever interests you. Okay, finally the multigrain, very new. Big shout out to Audio Parasites for the black panel, because obviously black is the new black. And Audio Parasites just do such a great job. We've also got Black Pams from Audio Parasites. Very, very cool company. Australian as well. So been really loving working with field recordings, especially like in terms of you know, weird street preachers, samples from old films in other languages. One of my favorites is this field recording I've got of this fellow that's reciting vowels and particular words in the Great Pyramid, the King's Pyramid. So you've got all this kind of reverb that sort of comes with that. And so have been loading those up into here. So I've got 2 to 8. So the first channel is set up and we had a listen to that in terms of processing the VHIKK and through the multigrain live. But then 2 to 8 are all different sort of vocal samples. And the basic sort of thing, I mean, I'm doing a lot more with this, being able to kind of go through 2 different scenes, but the basic kind of ballpark that I'm in is up this end is kind of more higher pitch, and then that's lower pitch, and then somewhere in between it's kind of choosing between the 2 different lots of settings. And that's the basics of sort of what I've been doing, but there's a bit more than that. So let's just turn the distortion down. Listen. And one of the really kind of fun things of having some modulation options, I've got some modulation options coming in from Oct again into the X and Y, and then also sort of randomly in terms of, you know, the scan or the start point is, it's like a little oracle. Is you kind of hit this and it's like, what's he gonna say to me? Mind and heart. Yeah, and this is running through the Ghost over here, delay and reverb, and I can, you know, filter that, add distortion. Again, really hands-on. Good. Oh, this is one of those samples again of the guy in the King's Chamber, and he's, you know, toning a vowel. fun. Have gone through a number of different kind of granular options, and this is kind of my favorite. This is just really fun. It's performative. Having the multi channels available at any point is just really, really wicked. And the crossfader is a little bit of kind of genius, to be able to go through those two different modes. That's it. That's it. We've done it. Thanks very much for sticking around. So this whole thing is still morphing, still evolving, still growing. I've got a month to go until the gig, so I've got a bit more work. I've just recorded a track using this as the kind of the start, and it's full AV track. That link will kind of pop up here or at the end, and so you can kind of go and watch that for a full listen. But you know, through the course of this, you've had a bit of a listen of how it's all sort of coming together and where it's working. Thanks so much again for watching. I guess I should say like and subscribe. Yeah, let me know what you're thinking, what your thoughts are of this. Is there anything that I'm missing? You know, what would you do differently? If you've got any of these modules, I need to watch some more videos around the Plasmavoice, but I'm really loving it. It's just like the latest edition and still working through it. But I feel like I'm kind of going on a deep dive on each of these different modules and this setup, and this is working really well. So the next thing that I'm going to do is a visual setup. So if you're interested in that, I'll do that in a few days and get that up. But this is enough. A whole hour and 21 minutes. Thanks for sticking it out. See you later. Bye.